Argana! Tioni screamed. The woman in question simply smiled, her lips curling up in snake-like amusement. They were on their way to the guild office when the Amazon warrior appeared in front of them, and she clearly had no intention of letting them pass. Haven't you had enough? Tioni snarled, fists clenched and ready to leap forward at any moment. Tioni, retreat. Calm down. Riveria shouted the warning, stopping the enraged Amazon in her tracks. Her weapon was being crafted like Aiz and Tiona's, so the magic user's only offensive equipment was a substitute staff. Still, she took a step forward, unafraid to face the rider on the road, even as the rest of her group backed away in fear. If there's something you want, then speak up. Otherwise, you will walk away. Argana simply looked at the unflappable high elf. Eyes narrowing, she looked somewhat reluctantly away from the fearless high elf to lock eyes with the Amazon behind her, still looking daggers in her direction. The words stopped time abruptly. Riveria's brows furrowed as the rest of the group looked around in confusion. None of them could make out the words, but Tioni snapped. And what does that mean, huh? Tell me, she screamed, unable to keep herself under control any longer. Argana just kept smiling. At any moment, it looked like Tioni would lose her cool completely, when all of a sudden. Lady Riveria. The scream came from the opposite direction. Everyone turned to see a breathless elf running towards her. What is that? Riveria asked, a sense of foreboding washing over her. Rakuta and the others, Lafia, they are, the elf tried to explain, looking like she had just seen a ghost. The color drained from her faces. Startled, Tioni whirled back around, only to find that in that tenth of an instant, the sandy-haired Amazon in front of them had disappeared. Tioni's eyes immediately fell to the floor, where a certain thing had been left in Argana's place. Grabbing it, she ran after Riveria and the others, her body still shaking. Loki toyed with the vision in front of her, her followers, covered in cuts and bruises with blood staining their clothes. Sorry, Loki. They were too much for us. Rakuta apologized, his voice hoarse. Loki practically ran out of NJRR Familia's home the second he heard the news, arriving at the harbor entrance only to find his followers looking pretty battered. None of them escaped serious injuries. And the wounds were clearly from combat, almost as if steel-hard fists had slammed into them 100 times. They used pieces of cloth to stop the bleeding, but it was already stained dark red. Rakuta was the only one still conscious. Rod! Could you give me a hand? Quickly. Understood. Come on, you good-for-nothings. Get your asses in gear. NJRR called his captain, who responded quickly. Rod shouted to his men, spurring the temporarily stunned fishermen of NJRR Familia into action. Who did this? Loki asked, his voice low. Kali Famili. They just suddenly attacked. No doubt they thought this group would be easy prey given the lack of first and even second-tier adventurers. And from Rakuta's tearful account of events, it appeared that Bak was solely responsible for bringing them down. They took Lafia. It was humiliating. They made a completely unexpected attack in broad daylight, rubbing dirt in their faces and making a fool of the normally peerless Loki Familia. But it was the damage they did to his precious followers that really made Loki's blood boil. That damn dwarf is trying to fight me, isn't she? Loki's normal indifference was all but gone, and a burning flush of unadulterated rage took its place. When the rest of the family began to gather around the scene after hearing the news, even those who had been with Loki the longest, Aki and Alicia, to name a few, found themselves terribly hesitant in the face of this new side of their goddess. Hey, We're not going to start a war right in the middle of the city, are we? NJRR made a tired face. He knew all too well how dangerous Loki could be when she had that look on her face. But her words fell on deaf ears. Despite the fury boiling inside her, her eyes were as cold as ice. As she watched her followers being attended to, something caught her eye and her scarlet eyes narrowed. The family crest was ripped off the clothing of one of her followers, tearing off the emblem. Is she declaring war here? But no, when they ran away with Lafia, they would have, So this is what is happening. Loki grimaced as he realized exactly what his opponent was thinking, the heinous and detestable plan Kali was hatching. She looked up at her followers gathered around her. Bring Tiona and Tioni back here. We can't let them out of our sight, she ordered, though in the back of her mind, she feared it was already too late.